What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Game Time with John Eads. Happy to be back with you after a week hiatus there. Had some people in town, had some things going on, needed a little bit of a break from work. So we're back this week, and we got a nice episode planned for you today, and then we'll have another one for you on Thursday. Be sure to like it, subscribe as we get going here. Appreciate all the support we've had already so far, and this being our really first season of doing the show. And we hope that you'll spread the word and get some more people here to come and join us. Tough loss for LSU football a few weeks ago to Alabama, and, you know, those Alabama fans are a little ruthless on social media if you pick against their team and they win. But, we're not going anywhere. We had a prediction that went wrong, and you know what? You can't get them all right. So we'll run it back this week and, go on through the end of the season, then pick it up with basketball and baseball. So we're not going anywhere once football season ends, so keep it right here. And be sure to follow us on social media at WAFB and all the platforms. And then for me, at John Eads TV on X, Facebook, Instagram, all those accounts we have, all those platforms I have an account on, and I post content there daily that you can find and enjoy at your leisure. So it's an all-football show today, but we're taking a little bit of a different approach. So we're starting with a holistic topic. Is LSU's football season a failure? I want to talk about it right now, and we'll also talk about Cai Bates decommitting from LSU, four-star cornerback recruit, and then Zach ARNETT and Jimbo Fisher fired from their respective schools. We'll get into all of that in this episode. So, starting with the first topic. Is LSU football's season a failure? We're now towards the end of the regular season, and the Tigers have Georgia State left. That's who they got this week, and then Texas A&M in 2 weeks. And, Georgia State's had a pretty good season, but I'm kind of sleeping on that game, to be honest with you, because it's just, they're not going to compete, okay? I think we can all agree on that. Not that I'm not going to watch, not that you're not going to watch, everybody's going to watch, and the Texas A&M game too. But I think now would be a good time, as LSU is, 6-3, pretty much winding down in the year 7-3, whatever. Looking back on this season, did this team meet your expectations? Was this season a good one for you as a fan? Was it a failure? I'll tell you how it ranges and how it kind of comes out for me. So you guys know, if you've been with us since the summer, that we were really high on this team. I picked them to win the SEC West. I held firm in that belief even as soon as, a week or two ago, going into that Alabama game. I picked the Tigers to win and just further that journey towards winning the SEC West, maybe winning the whole SEC. Of course, they didn't win that game in Alabama, and pretty much from there, the season was all but over for anything, relevant, to be honest with you. They're not going to make a New Year's Six Bowl, it seems. Obviously, they're not making the SEC Championship. It's Bama, Georgia, again. And, they're not going to the college football playoff. And in the summer, that's where I thought this team would go. I thought they had the talent needed, the coaching that is needed, and really all the ingredients a team needs to make a deep run, to have a really big season. The schedule was pretty favorable. There were some tests in there they had to win, and they didn't win those tests. And it started really in week 1 when they lost to Florida State. Now, the season wasn't over at that point. There were still windows of opportunity for LSU to, make up for that loss and get the train back on the tracks, but they didn't do that. They had the chance to do that against Ole Miss, failed, and then again against Alabama almost a month later. So looking back, I want you to let me know, was this season a failure for you? Because there's really two sides of this argument you can go to. On the one hand, Brian Kelly, I think, exceeded expectations in year 1 last year, took this team to the SEC Championship, beat Alabama, won the SEC West in his first year here with a team that was really solid, but I don't think many people thought would be as good as it was coming into the year. Now, then again, this is LSU football we're talking about, and people expect LSU to be good every year, to compete every year, and be a contender every year, and I completely understand that, and this year was no different. So now year 2, brings back a lot of the guys from that team last year that played well, and number 5 to start the season, top 10, a lot of hype, maybe one of those darling teams that you're like, maybe this is the year they can get back over the hump like they did in 2019 and run the table, win the whole thing. Certainly that was my pick. Alabama seemed to be trending down. Ole Miss is just kind of Ole Miss, even right now what they're doing. They go on win streaks, but they end up finishing with 3 losses. It's just wash, rinse, repeat every year. in LSU, it just seemed like this could be the year with Jaden Daniels back, with a core of that offensive line back. The defense on paper is supposed to be good. It just seemed like this could be the year to do that, and it's not. But again, think back to what we just talked about a minute ago. It's year 2 of Brian Kelly. 2 years, despite what Mississippi State and Texas A&M, some other schools might think, you got to be patient and let people build their programs, right? You can't just strike gold with the transfer portal every year. Michigan State was a good example of that. Had a nice first year under Mel Tucker, or that'd be a second year. But then the transfer portal was barren, and then they were bad last year, bad again this year, right? Same kind of deal here. So on the one hand, you got to think about patience, and Brian Kelly hasn't been given really a fair chance to build this program, to recruit the defense, to, see things go wrong and fix them on the defense, right? Of course, he's been coaching a long time. He was at Notre Dame for a long time, and the knock on him is, hey, he can get you 10, 11 wins, but he's not going to get you a title. That remains to be seen here. So on the one hand, I'm preaching patience to you, and you know what? The team was supposed to be good this year, and 10-3 ain't so bad. That's what's still on the table for this team to accomplish this year. Back-to-back 10-win seasons, it's better than going 5-7, right? Or some of the other SEC schools are kind of putting up and doing this year, right? But on the other hand, there's the other side of the argument. Look, number 1 offense in the country, Heisman-worthy quarterback, excellent skill position play, good running back, great offensive line, decent amount of talent across that defense, a lot of all SEC guys, Major Burns, Mekhi Wingo, Mason Smith, Harold Perkins, the list goes on and on and on. Should this team have accomplished more? I think so. But I also think it's fair to say that it was year 2 of Brian Kelly. This is not his team. A majority of the guys that are on this LSU team right now, he did not recruit. He had no business bringing to this school. Now he's bringing in a decent recruiting class next year. More on that in a second. What can Brian Kelly do to fix this defense going forward? Can he replicate the success that the offense has had for a 3rd straight year with Mike Denbrock and Jaden Daniels pretty much going to the NFL? I think that's expected, and maybe some other guys leaving too. Malik Neighbors, Logan Diggs, some other guys. Can he get this team back to the level that we thought they'd be preseason and then some? That's the question that he'll have to answer. But if I can put this season into one breadbasket, man, I think I would label it a failure, because I think you had all the pieces you need to win this year. You were supposed to have a good defense, and it wasn't good. I know there was injuries and younger guys had to play. This just wasn't the team that we all thought it would be. And I think we can all agree on that. But this team is good enough to make the college football playoff. When you've got the number 1 offense in the country, you're good enough to make the playoff. You're good enough to win the national championship if your defense can complement it at all. And ever since the Florida State game, we did not see this defense get better. We saw it beat up on mediocre teams, but we didn't see it get better and progress. And that was the problem with this team this year. That's what held them back. But I certainly think this LSU team is capable of making the college football playoff, the 4-team field. And if you're asking me if this season was a failure, I think so, because I'm not selling you blind hope. I talked about this team nonstop all summer, all the strengths they had, the few weaknesses they had. And for them to perform like this just didn't meet the standard for me. And if it doesn't meet the standard, to me, it's a failure. So yes, they can go to the ReliaQuest Bowl or whatever bowl you want and get to 10 wins. That's all fine and dandy, and that's great. But I've seen teams like this before. I grew up a Michigan fan, and for 3 or 4 different years, Michigan had teams capable of making the college football playoff, and they lost to Ohio State, and they lost the game they shouldn't have lost. They didn't win the games they needed to win to be an elite team, and I think that's what happened this year with LSU football. So for me, this season was a failure, but it's also year 2 of Brian Kelly, so it's fair to put that and mix that into the situation right now. I don't think there's any reason to hit the panic button. I don't think Brian Kelly's in the hot seat or anything, but I think that they could have done more with this team. But they'll be back, and I know that. I think we all know that, so stay tuned. All right, I mentioned this a second ago on the note of recruiting. LSU is in some pretty deep trouble right now, I'd say. I think we all know they're in deep trouble on defense, but how do you fix that? The transfer portal, but also the recruiting trail. And the Tigers lost a huge recruit yesterday when Cai Bates decommitted. This guy committed in the summer from Orlando, top 100 recruit, 4-star, big guy who I thought maybe could play early for this team because they don't really have a lot of talent at that position right now. Obviously, it's one of the weakest points in the team, and they brought in a lot of transfers last year, so it feels like if there's an elite corner that comes in as a freshman, which we've seen many times before at LSU, it once was DBU after all, that they could seize that position and play early. But now you've got 3 decommitments at cornerback in this 2025 recruiting class, and it dropped LSU from 11th to 14th in the national ranking. So it's a big loss. Andre Evans, also a cornerback decommit, flipped to Georgia in October, about the time that LSU lost to Ole Miss and was just struggling mightily on defense. He was a top 200 recruit. So you've lost 2 elite corner recruits in the matter of a month that figured to be cornerstones of your secondary in the future. And who do you still have committed? You still got guys. Also, Zion Ferguson was another decommit. I didn't mention him, but that's the third of the decommits. You've got 3 or 4 guys still committed in this class to play corner. Juwan Johnson from Lafayette, he could play safety or corner. Wallace Foster from Warren Easton, in-state guy. Bernard Causey from New Orleans. And then P.J. Woodland, a cornerback, safety kind of guy who decommitted from Mississippi State recently. So you still have, guys that you trust, guys that you like coming into the, program soon and filling those holes that you need them to do in that secondary. But they're not the elite national guys that you still have to bring in. Look, I've done stories on this. I understand the appeal to bring in-state Louisiana athletes. They're great athletes. They're very good at football. They have been for years. That's kind of been what LSU has prided itself upon, keeping in-state kids home, them developing and becoming the stars of the LSU program. And I get that. But in today's day and age of college football, you need to couple that with also cherry-picking a couple big national recruits, like Andre Evans, who is from Georgia, if I'm not mistaken, and Cai Bates, who's from Orlando. Those are the kind of guys you also have to bring in. And they're not top 200 and 100 recruits for no reason. These are good ball players. And you're now losing them to other programs, the same programs that are beating you in games that you need to win if you're LSU to be a national championship contender. Ole Miss, Alabama, Texas, Georgia. I'm just throwing teams out there. Those are the teams that are recruiting at the highest level right now that are beating you head-to-head in games that you need to win. Think this year. LSU's got to beat Florida State. The Seminoles have recruited very well. They win that game. I know that's not a direct, just because you recruit well doesn't mean you're going to win. Looking at you, Texas A&M. But I'm just saying that definitely factors in. Alabama, they've recruited better than LSU. And they beat the Tigers by 14 in a game that LSU needed to win to keep the season alive. You know what I'm saying? So, it's not the worst thing in the world. Decommitments happen. They happen all the time. But to happen at the position that you most need to address next year in 3 different times, 2 of which are top 200 recruits, that's a red flag. So when I saw that, I was bummed because, you're bringing guys in. Sure, good. In-state Louisiana kids. The problem is you did that this past cycle. And all the guys you trotted out there, I know they're freshmen, I know they're young, did not belong in the field and were exposed in situations where they could have been exposed. So if you're looking for an instant answer at the cornerback spot, I'm not sure you're getting it from the recruiting class this year anymore. Maybe it's Cai Bates, maybe it was Andre Evans, but they're both gone. One's at Georgia, the other, we'll see where he goes. Maybe Miami, Florida State, he's a Florida kid, so there's a lot of options there. And I guess you're going to have to, I don't know how many years of eligibility Zy Alexander has left. You'll have to further develop him. Deuce Chestnut, not even on the team right now. I don't even know what's going on with him. And Denver Harris, the same deal. Who knows? The cornerback position is rough, though. And personally, I was looking at this recruiting cycle as like a sign of optimism. Like, all right, the future is bright. These kids look good. They should be pretty good for this football team when they get here. But now they're not even coming here. So that cornerback position has been a problem all year. It's going to be a problem throughout the rest of the year. And then that's something, again, that Brian Kelly and the staff will have to address for next season, whether it be, again, through the transfer portal, more development, or going out and snagging an elite cornerback recruit to end the cycle. But that's just a little update there. Cai Bates is a tough loss. Andre Evans was a tough loss. And I know that Johnson tweeted something like, hey, in-state boys will get it done. Something like to that effect, like, hey, we're still confident in this group. The in-state Louisiana kids always pan out. I get that, and that's good, and that's stuff you like to see. But, I mean, if you still want to have a top 100 corner recruit in your class. That's the point, and they don't anymore. So that's a tough loss, and again, that cornerback position looks dire, and until proven otherwise, will continue to be dire, and recruiting is not going to change the outlook on that clearly until maybe it does before signing day. All right, let's round out the show with more of a national topic here. So, Zach Arnett, Jimbo Fisher fired from their respective schools. It's not every day that you watch a football game and days after it happens, both coaches get fired. The one that put up 51 points in a win and the one that only scored 10 in a loss. But that's what happened, and the SEC West coaching carousel has been turned on, and around it goes. So, let's start with Zach Arnett. He was in his first season at Mississippi State, and to me, this is a head shaker and a head scratcher, because how can you fire a coach who is in his first season taking over for a legend in Mike Leach, rest his soul, and just, in my opinion, has not been given enough time to build a program? How can you build a program in 1 year? Do you understand how much goes into building a college football program? You got to recruit. You got to win games. You got to earn the trust of the board and the athletic director, and kind of get your feet under you too. Listen, Zach Arnett was a defensive coordinator for Mississippi State, obviously, but even at a lower ranked school in terms of the Power 5 and the Group of 5 as soon as 2 years ago. Like, my alma mater, Syracuse, was looking at him to be the D coordinator, not the head coach. And I think that he got this position maybe a little prematurely, because when Leach passed away, they inserted Arnett as the interim head coach. And then he did a good enough job leading that team to a bowl win that they just made him the full-time coach. Bit of a gamble. He's a great defensive mind, but he's young, and he hadn't had a head coaching job before, even at the high school level, as far as I know, but definitely not the college level. He's just been a defensive coordinator, and that's a big step up, going from a DC to an HC. So I think that was a little bit of an interesting move to put him as the head coach. What's even more interesting is firing the same guy 10 games into his head coaching career as a full-time coach. I don't get it. 4-6, 1-6 in SEC play, and only one of those 6 losses in conference action was by one possession. So, look, it wasn't a good team this year. We saw Mississippi State play in Starkville. They got boat raced by LSU. Really didn't compete with anybody in the league. They did beat Arkansas, which is good. So they weren't a good team. And, I'm not going to try to explain to you that they were, or make technicality, whatever. They weren't good. I get that. But when you rebuild a program, you got to bottom out. And that's what they were doing. They were bottoming out. You can't just skip the bottoming out process, fire somebody, blame it on him, because you know what? You're starting the process all over again. What's Mississippi State going to do next year? The same thing they did this year. Not be a good team. Unless some miracle happens and Georgia turns into Mississippi State, MSU is not going to make a bowl game next year. I'm a big believer in that. They're losing Will Rogers, one of the best passers in SEC history. How is it going to get better? I don't. So I didn't understand that move. Arnett tried to change the offensive philosophy from the air raid that Mike Leach had to the pro style. And Will Rogers, as I said, one of the best quarterbacks in league history, passes the ball very well. He belongs in an air raid system. I don't know why he didn't transfer personally. So the offense didn't work. It didn't fit the skill, the personnel that you had on your team. That's why this team wasn't good. Defense wasn't great either. It's Mississippi State. I mean, they're kind of like the Rutgers of the Big Ten. Like, they're solid, they're fine, they're never going to be elite. You're going to get out-recruited every year. You don't have the same resources that Georgia, LSU, Alabama have. It just, you got to be a developmental program, and you got to hope to win 8-9 games a year. So I didn't understand that firing at all, to be honest with you. You can't pull the plug on a coach, especially at a program like that, after 1 year. I mean, that's a little ridiculous to me. But it's not my money I'm spending. It's not my buyout I'm paying. So just personally, I don't think it was a good move. That's just my 2 cents. So his buyout was low, Arnett's. On the complete flip side, and then some, Jimbo Fisher's was not. This guy's getting over $76 million not to coach at Texas A&M. Unreal. This guy's going to make what? I got it written down here. $19 million for the next 60 days. And then for every year until 2031, Jimbo Fisher's getting a $7 million paycheck from Texas A&M to do nothing. He could sit in his room the whole day, and he's making $7 million a year. Unbelievable. And you know what? A&M they drank the Kool-Aid. Jimbo Fisher had one good year with the Aggies. It was in the COVID season when they went 9-1, won the Orange Bowl, and then that's when he got that fat extension because people thought maybe he'd come coach at LSU because Coach O was out the door, right? And they drank the Kool-Aid. Think of that COVID year. It was such a wacky season. Indiana from the Big Ten actually looked like a good football team. Michigan went 2-4. We all know that was an outlier. Just a weird year in college football. And I think that is when people thought Jimbo would turn it around there and they would just roll from that point on, but it never happened. Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M was an 8-4 season every year, it seems like. So that one I understand a little bit more. You brought this guy in to win a national championship. He won one at Florida State. At A&M, you've got a multitude of resources. He had top 5 recruiting classes every year. I don't know how, but he did. And all they could manage to do was win like 7-8 games a year, doing less with more than other people do with less. So why should he be making that much money, like $10 million a year? I get that. The program was, quote, stuck in neutral, sources say. And, you know, he could make the excuse like he kind of does every year. I don't know what it is with A&M and Jimbo, but he never had a backup quarterback because every single year his quarterback got injured, and that would be his excuse. Hey, just wait till next year. We'll get our quarterback back from injury, and we'll be a good team. Every single year. You know what? That's what he would have said this offseason too, because their quarterback went down with injury, and they couldn't do anything. They're going to be 8-4 again at best. So that one I get. You bring in all this talent, and you can only win 8 games in a season. That can't happen. You had the number 1 recruiting class last year. What are you going to do with it? I mean, with that, you should win the SEC West. They haven't won the SEC West since joining the SEC in 2012, and that was 11 years ago. So I more so understand letting go of Jimbo Fisher. I think that there's maybe an argument on the side of keeping him, not only the buyout, but also, yeah, I mean, they have had a lot of injury problems and some bad luck there, and they've beaten Alabama a few times, and they've competed against some of the best teams. But at the end of the day, look, Jimbo, you had over 6 seasons, and all you could manage was 45-25 and barely scraping above 500 in SEC competition. And that is very underwhelming. It's very disappointing, and that's not the standard at Texas A&M, especially with the amount of money you make. So that one I understand. Zach Arnett, Jimbo Fisher fired. 2 more positions open up in the SEC West. If you've got ideas on who fills those positions, drop them in the comments section below and let me know your thoughts on those decisions. For me, Arnett was a bad decision. Jimbo, I'm not saying it was a good decision, but more of an understandable one. All right, that'll do it for the show. Thanks for watching. Again, like, share, subscribe. Follow me on the social media platforms. Be back on Thursday with an LSU Georgia State preview. We're going to get women's basketball in the mix too because they just won a game even today against Kent State, and they got a lot of talent. They're turning that team around after a tough loss to start the season, and they're going to Southeastern Louisiana on Friday for a game, which is interesting. But we're going to start talking about them more as well because they're one of the best teams in the country. So thanks again. See you guys on Thursday. And again, like, share, subscribe. Appreciate you watching.